aware of God's love for us? Or is God's love something that we just kind of take for granted anymore? I know that I often take God's love, or God's grace, God's unmerited favor for granted. Sometimes I get so wrapped up in my own little problems, like that motorcycle that still won't run, and I miss the other ways, the wonderful ways that God blesses me every day. To keep from missing God's blessings, God's expressions of love for me, I try to remind myself daily that my view of the events of my life are not necessarily the truth. Because I tend to see my life as a series of good times and some really bad times as well. The reality, the truth of the situation, is that God was moving through both the good times and the bad times, striving to make all things glorious. The movement of God is always from one moment of glory to the next moment of glory, regardless of how we perceive things, regardless of how we see things as good or bad or in between. We are called to move with God from faith to faith, trusting that God is doing what we cannot do for ourselves. This attitude of seeking God's glory in everything, of knowing that God is in our midst, even in times of trauma, even during difficult times. This isn't easy. Yet as Christians, we believe that we are the beloved of God. We believe that even in the darkest moment, God desires to express his love for us. In other words, we believe in redemption. Redemption. That's one of those churchy words, isn't it? What does it mean? A good definition is found in our epistle today, in Paul's letter to the Romans. The version that Glynis read from our lectionary, not the version in your bulletin. And since you don't have it before you, I'll remind you of the particular passage that I think is important for us to focus on this morning. Paul wrote, "We know that in everything God works for good for those who love him, who are called according to his purpose." In everything, God works for good. This isn't a promise that bad things won't happen. They will. But out of these tragedies, God will strive to fashion something good. This good thing will not make the pain go away. It won't erase the hurt. But hopefully it will instill within us hope if we put our trust in God. That is redemption. A painful time is redeemed by God and transformed into something new, something good. As an example, I'll tell you once again a brief story that I know I've shared with you before. When I was in the first grade, about 6 years old, I was diagnosed with a bronchial respiratory condition. And so I ended up being confined to my room from that point until age 11. My only companions were the many books that I was allowed to read. Now this confinement was a very difficult thing for a young boy to endure. But I do believe in redemption. I believe God is always working to make something good out of every difficult situation. So where is the redemption in being confined to a room for 5 years? Well, by age 11, I was an incurable bookworm. Being an avid reader was later to open many doors for me in my life. I find so much joy in the written word that if I had my life to live over again, I'd ask to spend 5 years in that room. Just so I could discover anew the wonder of the well-told story. All things work for good. Everything can be redeemed by God. That's what my life has taught me. Now, as you look at your own story, I bet you can see many places where God caused something new to rise from the ashes of your own broken dreams. As we look at the story of this particular family of God, we see what seems to be a series of many very good years and maybe a few not so good years, and maybe even a few bad years. But looked as a whole, we see that God was continuously working out his will, that God was redeeming this church, blessing you, loving you every step of the way. I know God is moving through this place. I can see it. In this morning's gospel, Jesus uses concrete examples to describe to his listeners what the kingdom of heaven is like. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast. The kingdom is like treasure. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant. The kingdom is like a mint. Following Jesus' model, let me offer you some concrete examples of how I know that God is moving through this church. Let me tell you how I know the St. Stephen's Church in Waretown is part of the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is like the beautiful flowers that greet me as I pull into the parking lot here. The kingdom of heaven is seen in the little girl who runs down the aisle and stops and stares at me in awe. The kingdom of heaven is revealed in walking into a hall full of people who know each other as well as they know their own children, yet still manage to find delight in each other's company and always find something different and new to talk about. The kingdom of heaven is witnessed in finding a member for whom we've all been very concerned, sitting among us this morning with a smile on her face. The kingdom of heaven is seen in the people who drop in during the week, not to make some request, not to share with me their troubles, but just to say hello and see how I'm doing. They ask, how are you? And they really mean it. The kingdom of heaven is seen in the volunteers that we have 5 days a week after week, working at the thrift outlet, in the food pantry. The kingdom of heaven is seen in the sincere warmth and acceptance that you have all offered me since the first day I arrived here. You see, this parish has something special going on. You care for one another. And your love for God is expressed in so many different ways that maybe you don't even notice them anymore. The kingdom of heaven is here. It is here right now as we gather together with Christ in our midst. Put your trust in God's redemptive power. God continues to work out his will among us. God is redeeming this church, blessing us and loving us every step of the way. Thanks be to God.